Oh, good. Okay, so we're live on YouTube. So I know we don't have everybody here yet, but I figured I would just get started with my welcome remarks since we have a big agenda tonight. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're joining us on YouTube, tonight is a steering committee meeting, which is functioning as the fourth meeting of our zoning subcommittee. So as a reminder, the ultimate goal for the subcommittee is to help limit the total rounds of revisions that are going to be required for the draft zoning code updates before they're ready for public input and for town board final review. So this is meant to streamline the process and help us stay on budget. So in summary, tonight we're going to review all three batches of the recommended updates to the zoning code so that these updates are aligned with the comprehensive plan vision statement, goals, and objectives. And those draft vision statement, goals, and objectives are all posted to our page on the town website right now, and they have been for a while. So at the end of the meeting tonight, also, we're going to review next steps as well. So leading up to tonight's meeting, the full town board, as well as the group here, and including Jan, who is the town planner, and Judd, who is town board counsel, that whole group reviewed everything leading up till tonight. Everything was shared with us from Valerie and her team at NPV. They're the planning consultants. So we all understand we're reviewing with an eye towards two things tonight. So one, consistency with the draft vision statement, goals, and objectives, and two, practical implementation and efficiency. So for everyone watching, with regards to practical implementation, this subcommittee includes the various delegated boards and councils that actually implement the code on an ongoing basis. So we expect that the members here will be able to make suggestions and ask questions that will help NPV further refine the recommendations. So turning our attention to tonight. So I want to highlight again, as I do at every one of these meetings, that the changes that NPV has proposed to the zoning code are based on and grounded in the public input and the feedback that NPV has collected during round 1 and round 2 public workshops and surveys. So each of the changes is directly related to one of the draft goals and objectives for the comprehensive plan. Some of the proposed changes from NPV will require a policy decision, and we all know and appreciate that the town board is the ultimate authority there. It's great that we already have comments from the town board that Andrea and Dan, as well as Judd and Jan, have reviewed and provided comments. As a result, we have a really great framework to have another very productive conversation tonight and work towards our goal of streamlining the process, limiting the total rounds of revisions for everybody, and staying on budget. Okay, so all that being said, I know we have a lot to get through tonight, and we're gonna, one more time, so hopefully the last meeting we'll need to do this. We're just gonna keep going until we're done. I'll be watching the clock and making sure that we keep the discussion moving. So if I stop you in the middle of a comment or ask you to hold the comment for later, please know nothing personal. And please just always make a note of any questions that go unanswered or anything that's lingering that doesn't get addressed tonight, and follow up with me after the meeting to let me know. Thank you. Okay, so with that, before we get into the nuts and bolts, we're just going to quickly approve some minutes. So the first is from the steering committee meeting that was in September. So steering committee members, I need one of you to second, and then I need a vote. So John seconding, and all three of us are in favor? Yes. Okay. And then for October minutes, that was the zoning subcommittee. So pretty much all the town people, not the professionals, can vote on this one. So I'll motion to approve the October minutes. I need a second. Charlene seconding. All in favor? And Rose, I assume you're in favor too, because you were at that one. I think that's what her raised hand.
Yes.
Perfect.
I'll raise my hand to do that. Okay.
Excellent. Okay, so we're good to go. Okay, so let me share my screen. I'm going to share the agenda. Actually, I'm just going to pull up the agenda in the background for my own info here. Yeah, let's just jump right in. So what I'm going to do is share my screen and I'll keep things moving along. Valerie, I'm going to let you, for this first document we have here, just get myself organized. Okay, here we go. Okay, so for a number of the documents, steep slopes, some of these documents, this is the first and second batch we're going to review here. So just as a reminder, these are documents that we reviewed in October and then again in November, for the most part. So the first one, steep slopes, there are a few specific comments. So we're going to scroll through and address those. Some of the other documents, there aren't any comments left. They've all been addressed or resolved. So we can just kind of talk about those high level. But for steep slopes, there was one lingering question. So Valerie, I'm going to let you address this one.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So this one at the last meeting, there was some concern in terms of, first of all, adding a total area and then also increasing the overall minimum horizontal dimension. So I proposed 5,000 square feet and I proposed 20 feet. So I've proposed that as of December 7th, and I didn't really receive too many comments. I got something from the supervisor, as you can see. Curious why or not, is this the cover or the case where the applicant owns 2 or more adjacent lots? I think it's, yes, I mean, to a larger extent, or if it's going to cross property boundaries based on a particular application. But again, if everybody wants to clarify that a little bit more, we can. And then I think the other comment that came in, if you want to scroll down a little bit, Katie.
Before you leave that, maybe let me just say, I think that's appropriate to say on a single lot or not, because if we're reviewing, say, a subdivision proposal, there might be multiple proposed lots, and I think it should apply. So I understand the question about why is that there, but I think it's okay.
Okay.
So can I just understand it? If there's a section of steep slope that's 20 foot wide and it's 1 foot of it's on, my lot and 19 feet are on the next lot over, anything I want to do, that 1 foot kicks this in.
No, it's about the application itself. So unless you're planning to join your lot with the neighbor's lot and all of a sudden that becomes a lot, unless you're going to do a lot merger, if you do something on your lot, it's really based upon your lot. This is like in terms of applications that might have multiple lots, or an application that might, sometimes people own more than one lot and are looking to do something on both lots at the same time in terms of an overall development.
Okay.
Judd or Charlene, are you okay leaving it as it is? You're on mute, Judd.
Yeah, I am. You know what? I agree with the point, and I just marked it. Valerie, I'm just going to send you some language tomorrow morning, just clarifying it a little bit. I think the concept or the idea is on point. Let me just see if I can tweak it really minimally, but it needs to be in there.
Good.
Agreed.
Excellent. Okay, and
see, you give a lawyer anything in words, ask Charlene, and we're going to change it. So
yes,
yeah. So
Completely.
Valerie, please
I'm
don't
used
take
to
it
it.
personally. Yeah, but yeah, let me
she knows who she's dealing with at this point.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tweet. I just flagged it. We'll
Good. Okay.
take care of it. Yeah. Okay.
And I didn't see any responses, and I know Jan couldn't be here tonight, but he did tell me if he had any, he went through the documents, and if he had any concerns, he was going to let us know. So his silence means that he's comfortable with your changes there, and that was at his direct request to sort of expand that. So I think we're good here.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, the only other one thing from one thing Rose actually brought up that that Jan sort of seconded was do we need to make an exemption for trails for trail workers, trail volunteers, nature trails, that kind of thing?
In general, you should know that in dealing with trails and trying to get through them on steep slopes, we will generally traverse it intentionally to try to preserve it and not to promote any kind of erosion or anything like that. But I'm not sure that we want to hold them back from creating a path through there if necessary. So I don't know how you want to address that.
Well, I think.
I can't hear.
I haven't
Valerie, we can't hear you.
That's better. You just need to
Okay.
be closer.
I have not come across a community that really worries about the trails, right? Because a lot of it's on if it's on parkland, I know you have private, trails.
Yes.
But usually it's, it doesn't ever rise to the level of a definition of like steep slopes. I mean, that one's 5,000 square feet, right? You're not going to be developing a 5,000 square foot.
No. That's just it. It's just a trail.
Right.
So I don't know whether it necessarily has to be addressed, but if we don't talk about it, I don't want to get caught up later. And
I mean, we can put an exemption in there if you'd like. I mean, I think but it's just going to have to be a general exemption as opposed to trying to describe what trails count, what trails don't count.
Right.
It would just have to be a general
in
blanketed.
general, when we have any kinds of doubts about what we're doing or being near wetlands or any of that kind of stuff, we usually contact Jan Johansson, and that. So if that kind of a clause helps, then that could always work.
I think you're going to get a lot. I think we have to keep in mind that this all has to be enforceable, and it has to be some, like, so when you start adding in, like, before you begin trail work, you have to, like, it's going to be embedded deep into your steep slopes regulations.
Okay.
So I think I would look at it more from a simplistic point of view and just exempt it if that's what you're concerned with.
That's fine. Okay.
Charlene?
I think in the normal ground maintenance, it's sort of included, and there's enough words there to make a general aspect of trail, because you're using the trail for a specific purpose, right?
Yeah. To diverse, to get from one place to another. That's all.
Right.
Is that what yeah.
Yeah, and what are you doing on either side of it on the trail?
It'll just be a continuous trail. Do you know what I mean? Like going from one place to another, it gets blazed. We create trails in all of our parks and preserves, and
right.
yeah.
But I think I think there's enough language in that it's okay. The disturbance,
that's fine.
Temporary emergency as determined by the town engineer. I mean, you have enough there that the trails, first of all, they exist. And if you're going to do a new trail, you do check with someone. So
yes, we do. We generally present them so that people know.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm hearing we don't need to add anything in then.
Okay, great.
Okay, I'm going to mark that result. Okay. We can double check on that. That was just a comment that came in tonight. So,
yeah, I'll double check on that.
okay, I think then that is the end of the specific. Oh, sorry. Oh no, this is just Valerie clarifying.
Right. So I think there was a number of questions, and I just want to, there's a number of questions that came up, whether it's town engineer or building inspector, but ultimately it's the building inspector that has the authority. It's because the town engineer is a consulting engineer. So it's fine if the building inspector, and in normal circumstances, the building inspector can consult with the town engineer, but it's ultimately the building inspector who issues the permit, who identifies the violation. So it needs to remain that.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so everybody's
So
good
do
with
I.
that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to mark those as resolved as well. Okay, as to the fine numbers, what did you want to do about that, Valerie?
That's really up to the town.
Yeah.
So I just put in, I just put something in there. Happy to change it.
So I think we can leave it as is, and when this goes to the town board for their final review, that would be something that they could amend if they wanted to. Dan's nodding, so that's
Yeah,
good.
do they have a separate, I know there's a separate like schedule that the town board puts together for fees. Is there, does our town or do other towns keep that independent of the code so that it can be updated more easily?
That's correct.
So maybe we want to say, suggest saying that the fines are as determined by the town board, and we just have to make sure that the town board puts them on a schedule somewhere.
No, so the fines are, so that it does sound like a good idea, except for the fact that the fines, like this is how the court systems will look at how fines are being issued. And I mean, Judd looks like he wants to say something.
Yeah,
I'll turn it over to him.
when it comes to fines, I'd prefer to have it in the code. As
And that's
opposed
fine with me.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll leave it as is, and the town board can change that if necessary. Okay, then before we leave steep slopes, does anybody have any lingering questions? Okay, hearing none, we're gonna move on to excavation and fill. I can get my screen to behave. Okay, so the big change here was that Valerie updated this to 15 cubic yards. And now I can't verify the accuracy of this, but it's like roughly 6 to 8 pickup truck loads. So that's a lot. Like that's a much bigger project than we were initially talking about. So I think Jan was happy with that update. And that really is the only remaining comment in here.
Yes.
So did anybody have any lingering thoughts or questions about this?
I
Okay.
was just wondering if depth made any difference. Because I'm imagining like somebody's got a really long driveway and it's just dressing it with some gravel. But if you add it all up, it adds up to this. Or maybe that needs a permit anyway. I don't know, but I'm just wondering if there's also a
I haven't seen depth. I think
No.
it's usually just cubic
okay.
yards.
That maybe that's just such a stupid example that it just would never come up.
I think we have something in here. As I vaguely remember, an exception is like if it's a top dressing of something, so you can
Yes.
spread.
Topsoil dressing thing.
Right, we do
yeah.
have certain exemptions in there.
Right. So if
Gardens.
somebody is just dressing the top, so even if they were, to my mind, and that if you're dressing the top of a gravel driveway, it's not like it's sort of normal
yeah.
maintenance, not a
Right.
not a fill.
Fill activity.
Okay. Good. That's a good
Okay.
question.
There you go.
Great. Okay. Okay, so no overriding things about this. Great. Okay. Now wetlands, we have definitely looked at wetlands in very close detail in October and also in November, and Jan has gone through and double checked this as of last week or the end of last week, so very recently. So let me just confirm. Yes, there are no remaining comments in this document. So is any lingering questions or concerns about the wetlands?
No.
Okay.
Just my comments on the
Oh, you went on mute. There you go.
my comment on performance security, have they been woven
Yes,
in?
I added them into
Yeah,
this.
great. I'm sorry. Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, and I took your language for performance security and put that into a number of the chapters or amendments that involved the performance bond, and I tweaked them a bit, you know, because clearly that one referred to wetlands, and I changed them to a couple others.
Okay, great.
Mhm. Good. Okay, anything else on wetlands? All right, good job, team. We're making it through. Okay, exterior lighting. This one, there are no remaining comments on this. I think Valerie did a really good job of updating it based on our discussion last time. Do you want to just give a little overview, Valerie?
Yeah,
or-
so I specifically pulled out stuff for like residential versus non-residential properties. I mean, I think that was the biggest concern. And so now, like in terms of a lighting plan and those additional like requirements that like the committee thought had concerns with it, if it applies to residential, it might be too strict, that this is really focusing on the site plans, the non-residential and multifamily structures, anything that's going to be like larger development within the town.
I think that addresses all the concerns that were brought up.
So we really don't have things that were, so we took out things that might apply to residential.
No, you
like-
actually have a section here now for residential. So
Thank you. Okay.
Right here.
Yeah,
yeah,
I
so
thought there
this
was.
is the
and then-
standards for residential, and then the standards for non-residential and multifamily structures.
Good. Okay. That's, I was confused listening to you. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
The residential is just much more broad.
And a lot of it was from the original text that everyone felt that they were comfortable with. So
Right.
we just brought that in.
Excellent. Okay. Okay, so any remaining questions on exterior lighting? Okay, great. Same with landscaping,
Yes.
screening and buffer areas. There are no leftover comments here, but again, Valerie. I just
So
wanna
I,
give-
right, so I specifically, again, the concern was how does it get applied? So this one is specifically, a landscape plan shall be submitted in conjunction with any site plan, subdivision, or special use permit application, unless waived by the planning board. So the planning board could potentially waive a landscaping plan if you felt that it's not necessary, but it really, again, captures it puts the requirement in for some of your more larger scale or more intensive types of development.
So there's nothing left in here about residential only.
No.
Okay. Got it. Any remaining questions or thoughts on this one?
And this one has the new performance security language from Judd.
Yeah, if you scroll down.
Okay, no, I just want to
No,
confirm
but
that.
I mean, I think it'd be good just so that everyone can see it.
You give
Oh
me
no,
a-
this one doesn't have performance
Yeah,
bonds
but
associated with it.
Yeah, but I think it's picked up.
You want me to search for a specific word?
No, I don't think it's,
No, I don't think this one had it in here.
No, but I think. But this is folded into the zoning code.
Yes.
Right.
it is.
Yeah, I think we'll pick it up later. Yeah, I'll look at that. Yeah.
yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. This is a
yeah.
subsection of 220.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I get delirious.
Oh, it's
So,
good.
so am I. So I thought there was, I
All
I
good.
put in a
There's
lot of performance bond language over the
Yeah.
last couple of weeks.
a lot of moving parts, but it's good to confirm so we're all on the same page. Okay, so we're good on this one? I think so. Okay, excellent. All right, so the next one, site development, there were a few specific comments left over. So let me just bring those up. Okay. So, Tony, this was just a few days ago. We had previously there had been a bunch of comments on this, and we chatted about it during the last meeting of just like what exactly is covered under accessory facilities. And so Tony was inquiring as to that too.
So our last conversation, you wanted generators added, so I did add generators, but if we want to add in a couple others, you know, and a couple other examples, I'm happy to do that as well. I mean, Tony did bring up mechanical or electrical, so we could even identify those if you'd like.
I'm sorry, this might be a silly question, but that's what it's referring to, right? By providing examples, we're just clarifying. We're not actually like pigeonholing it any further,
No.
are we?
No.
Okay. I can't see why additional examples would be a problem. Does anybody have an objection to that? Not hearing any. Okay, then yeah, I think we'll go ahead and we'll update that. Oh, John, go ahead.
I still come back to the fact that, when you say a nuisance, it's sort of a ill-defined term that's probably not enforceable.
Mm.
I
Jen?
think if it is I think what this gives is the ability, if someone has something that has done something, let's just say there's a fire hazard that hasn't been addressed or something, it allows, it gives a reason. Of course, fire hazard would probably be part of the building code, but it gives a reason for things that can be there. I understand your point completely, but I think it helps enable some action to be taken.
This is
get a-
for the site plan review, right? So these are the findings that the planning board's going to make. This isn't specific to any particular use. So the
Okay.
planning board should be taking these things into consideration when reviewing an application.
I just don't know how you're going to, let's say for generator, know ahead of the installation that it's a nuisance.
Well, this would allow us to say, could you move it away from your next door neighbor's bedroom and move it closer to the back of your house
Right.
or to, so because we have places where the yards are 10 feet wide and you could say, move it to the back of your house instead of the side of your house, please, as part of the site plan. I think it's fine. John,
Jed, I'd just like you to your general comment.
No, I agree. And these are standards, and I hate to say it, but sometimes a little lack of clarity in terms of what the planning board's going to look at is better.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
And this is site plan review, so the
Right.
same example of the generator, if someone's it's an existing home and he's putting that generator at the edge of his property near his neighbor's bedroom, that's something else.
yeah, that probably would not come to us. This is as part of a big plan as they're putting together
Yeah.
the site plan.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Yeah, I think the building code anyway doesn't allow you to do that. I think it has to be so many feet from your border. Having just put one in, I went through all this, so.
Okay.
I think the zoning board looks at pre-existing installed generators all the time. So it happens, but this is a site plan, so we should try to
Yeah.
make sure we see it in the site plan.
Yeah. Okay, so we're okay with adding some more additional examples just to clarify. Okay. This was a question from Tony about sidewalks. So Valerie, you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, so I think Tony was raising whether it should be mandatory. And I think right now we have provisions should be considered as appropriate. So I'm a little concerned with mandating sidewalks. Although it is something that, the town the town has a complete streets policy. So this is something that the planning board has a lot of, I think that it has a lot of weight behind them in order to raise this question and potentially work it into your site plan. But my concern, and I'll turn it over to Judd my concern is the mandatory aspect.
Yeah, and I'm comfortable with the language as it is because it is mandatory in the sense that those considerations must be taken into account. It doesn't say may be considered. It should be considered. And it gives the planning board the opportunity to look at the particular site and its context. So, because sidewalks are not going to be appropriate in every situation. So at least you do have, in a sense, a mandate that it be evaluated. So I'm fine with the language as it is.
Okay, Charlene, you want to elaborate on your comment a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I have two comments. I agree with Valerie and Judd that we should look at it and not make it mandatory, because a lot of it, a lot of them, the roads are fronting on state roads and they have their own issues there and they have to clarify that. But as a general statement, it's like great that we look at it, and we can probably put in the resolution that they would have to maintain it and repair it, but we don't have general, from what I saw, Judd, and maybe it's there, I just couldn't find it. Any position on who puts in sidewalks, who can put in sidewalks, who repairs the sidewalks, who maintains the sidewalks. I mean, we just have a general statement that the town's not responsible for any of their for any of their sidewalks. They're responsible only for their sidewalks and nobody else's. But we don't say anything about other people's sidewalks. And if we're going to ask for sidewalks, and appropriately so, does the town board have a general idea of how we're going to do that? Are we going to have them maintain all of them and repair all of them? Only commercial will be repaired and maintained by the commercial property. What about the residential? So that's my statement.
Who shovels them in the winter? I mean, I think that's a
Yeah.
good point.
So let's have Dan go next, and then we can hear from Judd.
So agreed with that, Charlene, and I actually have a sample sidewalk code that I grabbed out of the conference I was at, and I think it really was quite considerate of all those factors that you talked about. I wonder if this provision should say something to the effect like, where sidewalk placement won't be unduly compromised. In other words, the sidewalks would naturally go along the frontage or whatever. They should have a good reason for doing something that eliminates the possibility of having sidewalks. Just a thought.
Again, this is for site plan review, like standards to be considered. You do have a streets and sidewalks chapter in your town code. A lot of these elements you're raising, I think, should ultimately would go into that chapter, the town code.
Well, I agree, Valerie, but it's also, you really should think about it before you start requiring sidewalks.
Judd, can you go ahead?
Well, I agree with Valerie that if we're going to begin to have a consistent set of regulations for sidewalks, you really need either a set aside provision in the zoning code, or a set aside chapter in the town code as to sidewalks. These are all great thoughts and great. I think they should find some voice in the town code. I'm just not sure we can do it in one particular subsection of the zoning code that deals with site plan review. I think I think a standalone chapter in the town code is probably appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Or a more expansive zoning code provision like the one Dan's talking about.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm making a note here.
So why don't we park that to the side and we can look at that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So is everybody okay with it as it is? Provision G here for the purposes of this site plan document.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just making a note that we're going to revisit that in a different way. Okay. I think that was the last, yes, that was the only other comment in here. So any lingering thoughts about the site plan approval? Okay. The next item is definitions. And the beginning updated definitions and word usage. There weren't any leftover comments here. Everything had been addressed and updated as per previous discussions. So any lingering questions or concerns about this one? Okay. Excellent. That completes our review of batch 1 and batch 2. There were a few I didn't include in here that were pretty much done and dusted during the previous meetings, and no new questions or concern had popped up on those. So great. Well, I think that's really good news. Everyone's feeling very good about batch 1 and batch 2, and now we can dive into batch 3 and spend the rest of the time tonight just going through those. Okay, let me just share that. Batch 3. Okay, amendments. So let's dive in right here. Did Valerie answer your question here, Jan, just on what this is actually doing? This is just stating who can petition. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, Jan's nodding her head. I'm going to mark that as resolved. Bigger.
I think that was it.
That was it. Yep. Okay. So did anybody have any questions or concerns about the amendments article here?
I had provided comments on this.
Let me just pull up your email.
Yeah, really for kind of a, and again, I apologize to everyone in the way I'm tendering comments. It's like anytime I touch a document in my office with track changes, the running joke is, a bomb goes off.
I've had to put out a few of those, not only from you, sir. So, but it's okay because when someone accidentally deletes something, I get a little note and then I'm able to fix it. So it's not a problem. Don't worry.
Right. So
I didn't have a chance to put your comments in there, but I have your email flagged that after tonight I was going to drop in your comments. Which are all legalese.
Just do so. I mean, I can go through, kind of the big things are one, that streamline this so that any an owner of property can make the petition. The other thing I wanted to make clear is that the town board on petition maintains, as it has, the legislative discretion to decide whether it wants to act on it or not. Because I don't want to put the town board in a position that anytime someone petitions for a zone change, it has to go immediately to public hearing. That's not a requirement. If the town board's the legislative body, it can decide to do what it wants. The protest provisions in the in the amendment provision are fine. The $25 fee referenced in A should come out, and it should everything should be according to whatever the fee schedule is adopted by the town. And I'm doing this from memory, but the other kind of overriding question I had, and really kind of a policy question, is that if referrals made to the planning board, the town planning board, and if the town planning board were to come back with a recommendation of no change, would the town want to adopt a policy that under those circumstances, just as if something went to the county and the county were to come back and give a negative recommendation, that it's then incumbent on the town board to act on the change by supermajority? And that's just a policy question. I'm not advocating one way or another, but in some towns or some jurisdictions, when the referral is made to the local planning board, and if it comes back with a recommendation that the petition change should not occur, it then triggers a supermajority requirement with the governing body. And like I said, that's a policy question, and I just throw it out there.
So
Go ahead, Dan.
the petition's coming from one of the boards to the town board.
Yeah.
And-
So Dan, I guess I own property in Vista, and I want to rezone it, from residential to general business or whatever. I petition the town board for a zoning change. The town board gets the petition. It's then up to the town board whether they want to act on it or not. If they act on it, start to process it, it goes to the planning board for recommendation and, review and recommendation. If the planning board comes back and says, we recommend against this, it's not as if it nixes the requested change completely, but you're then in a position where you're going to have 4 out of 5 votes to adopt the requested change or the change. And the same thing would be true on a referral, mandatory referral to county planning. If they come back on a legislative change or a zoning change and say we recommend against, it triggers the same supermajority requirement. So
Is that common? That kind of process?
is it common? It's out there. It definitely at the county level, it's it's in the general municipal law, so that's state law. It's really it's a local. It really is within the province. So just something to think about.
Yeah,
I'm not advocating one way or another. I'm not. But it's a question that should be considered.
Thank you. Charlene, you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I have seen places that do it, as with Judd. There's some places that do it, some places that don't. I would advocate for it because it gives a sort of a buffer for the town board when they have, this whole block saying, well, we want to be whatever they want to be, and giving them the ability to send it to the planning board. And that's just not to say that planning board won't have reasons. It has to be really legitimate planning board reasons that they do not think that this would be advisable. And then it goes back to the town board for the ultimate decision, but it gives them a little more ability to say no.
Okay, Jan?
If they so choose, or say yes if they so choose.
Right. I'd like this as well, and not just because I'm on the planning board, but I think there are occasionally things where we have seen, and even before I got on the board, there were things that came through that the planning board had, I think, some real questions about how it was going to get implemented. How do we, what do we do with this when it comes in? And I think it sort of recognizes that, yes, definitely the legislative burden is on the town board, but to the extent that there's comments that say this would help our implementation if you just tweaked it a little, I think it brings attention to that, to the people who have to kind of work with the code once it's been approved. So I again, it's up to the town board what they want to do, but I'm just putting it here as one of the aspects where I think it adds extra weight to the people who are trying to work at the behest of the town for the town's purposes.
Mhm.
I have an objection to putting this language in here. I mean, we're not finalizing today, so it just means
Yeah.
it goes
I
for
think that's what
consideration.
I'm hearing. Valerie, why don't you put that in and the town board can just, flag it as something that they'll ultimately decide on when this comes to their final review.
Do for
But
like,
as always.
Yeah. So
Right.
Valerie, if you want if you want to fold in my comments and then get it back to me and I'll work on that piece.
sounds good.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, that sounds like a great plan. Anything else on the amendments article? Did we cover all of your stuff, Judd? And you guys
Yeah.
will work behind the
Yeah.
scenes.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, great. The next one is off-street parking. There were some questions here. So, Valerie, I know you left the comments that you wanted to discuss, so I'll just let you take these first ones here.
There was like a lot of questions on like town board, planning board attorney versus town attorney. That's up to the town how you'd like to proceed. I think at some point the supervisor suggested just keeping it as town attorney because it gives a little bit more flexibility, but
I as the planning board attorney, seriously, I would keep it as town attorney because a lot of these requirements really relate to commitments being made between an applicant and the town.
Mm.
So ultimately, it should be the town attorney. I think in practical effect, that'll work itself out as to who's reviewing and who's signing off. So, I would just say keep it a town attorney.
Okay. And then this question here, can you just address that, Valerie?
I think it's just saying when that agreement gets terminated, in terms of site plan review and approval, we'd have to go back to your site plan regulations and see about requirements. And, I would think most of your non-residential automatically requires site plan approval. But this would not be the area where you would put that, right? If you were going to specifically say any change of use with if that was going to be a very specific type of thing that requires site plan approval, then we'd have to put it into the site plan approval section.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay. Okay, Tony's question here.
Right. So, we can
Come closer.
I can sometimes there's a little bit that talks about an overhang, so I can add in a little bit of text on that if we prefer to do that.
So how does that sound to everybody?
I wasn't sure why this change was being made. It seems like I have certainly tried to get into some parking spaces where they have columns out, and sometimes it's really quite tight.
That's fine if you prefer to keep it at 10. That's really up to this board. I was just kind of suggesting 9 feet. You typically see that, but we can keep it at 10 if you prefer.
Judd, it looks like you want to say something. Do you have a thought? No. What does the group think?
If Valerie recommends 9, I'm okay with it. It's possible that the places I'm trying to get into are even narrower. So I defer to the expert.
I think wider the better.
It's fine. I don't think you're going to have too many situations where that specific thing comes into play. So I'll move it back to 10.
So was Tony's point that if they're both 9 feet, then you don't need it's
Right,
bordered by.
Right.
Okay. All right. Oh, Charlene?
Is there another requirement for electric vehicles as to the space? Because I know we had one issue about the space and I think it was the length of it that was a problem. But are there different requirements?
EV charging stations are a whole nother like area that we would have to, I mean, I'm actually working on it with another community right now to deal with the whole EV charging and parking and new regulations associated with that. The only thing I added in here was that, you know, technically you could have EV charging stations as, you know, as considered as like a parking space, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean, so if you require 10 parking spaces and somebody wants to put in an EV charging station and space in one of them, they can still count as 10 parking spaces towards your overall lot account, parking lot accountment. Right, so I have EV charge can be counted as contributing to the minimum off-street parking requirements as listed in subsections D.
Should we put that in as like a goal or an objective to look at EV parking
Yes, I mean,
in
that,
general?
yes, I would,
You
I
know,
would add
in
that
there, right?
along with your, what we were just talking about earlier.
Sidewalks.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
Put that on the list of
Yeah,
additional
Yeah.
follow-up items.
and maybe make, you know, put in some legislation as a recommendation or whatever.
Okay, John?
Yeah, just be very careful. Don't say EV vehicles. We're really only deferring to places that have a charger.
In this,
Right, because other than charging, EVs are like everything else. So there's nothing special about them in terms of size.
okay. Jan?
Yes, I might have said this somewhere in here, but there are codes. We recently saw one in Richfield where they, for a new, I don't know, for any new parking lot that had, I think it was 20 or more spaces, at least 10% of the spaces had to be equipped with chargers. I know that's an additional or future thing, but the code could kind of maybe be lifted from Richfield. It's really it's really a good piece of I thought it was a good piece of code that the town board might want to look at the time when we reviewed it. So I'm wondering if we could, just pick up that section and look at and perhaps recommend that to the
What was that
town
called?
board.
What should I add to what's that called, Jan? Are we
It's-
talking about EV parking and charging?
Yes, it's called
That's
EV
fine.
charge vehicles, charging spaces
Okay.
in new parking developments.
Okay, I'm just adding that to the follow-up list.
Yeah, thank you.
Dan?
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I don't know that they necessarily have to install the chargers, but you want them to maybe be charger install ready by throwing conduit in, so they don't have to tear up the driveways and stuff, so that they're planned out, but they don't necessarily, you don't have to install them all.
That's a good idea.
Valerie, did you have anything else you wanted to say on that?
no, I mean, I think
Okay,
it's
I think
as you
we
can
can
see that there was, as you can see, there's a number of items that that you have to start thinking about in terms of EV charging. And then in addition, you still have some of these other commercial uses that are starting to come in. Like I have a couple applications that are looking to install EV charging stations, but they also have advertisements on them. So they're right. So the EV charging is becoming a very fluid type of industry. And I think this is where it's not so cut and dry in terms of like regulations. And so I think this would be one of those things that would involve a little bit more research and then also additional conversations with the town in terms of what you want to allow and what you don't want to allow.
Okay, Jan, did we answer your questions about no restrictions put on these spaces?
I don't well, I just think no restrictions. It should say that it should be EV charging vehicle only, or only for use while charging, something like that should be in it. But I was also going to say, is there anything in this that, so if someone, let's say somebody brings in a multifamily housing to the planning board, is there anything in here that would keep us from asking them to install some kind of charging facility now or in the future, you know, just for the planning purposes? Because I really think, you know, as we start going forward with you know, if you own your own house, you can put in a charging thing. But if you're in a multifamily or something, we might want to see that within the next 10 years. So maybe that's a separate law that Valerie was talking about. But is there anything, if we tried to convince somebody about how that would actually be beneficial for their ability to rent things out in the future or something, that keeps us from encouraging them to do that?
I'll let Valerie answer. There are two separate questions there. So Valerie, go ahead.
Have that conversation. You can have that conversation with your applicants. That there's nothing in this code that prevents you from doing that.
Perfect.
Okay. And her first question about what that means, no restrictions put.
Restrictions, I was specifically putting, so let's say you require 10 parking spaces. So if in order for, now I mean, this is, I just put it out there, you know, we can always remove it, but this would prevent somebody from saying, well, I put in three EV charging stations and only electric vehicles can park there, right? And only for a couple, you know, hours. Sometimes at that point, let's say you need to use all those 10 spaces. That's where I was saying that there would be no restrictions, so they could count as part of your minimum requirements. If you would prefer not to have that, then we can remove that text.
Charlene, did you want to say something on that? You're on mute.
I sort of understand that Valerie, you make a really good point, because then they have the required number of spaces, and you know, you take your chances if you have an electric vehicle. And if it's just restricted to EVs, then it stands to reason that you need more spaces to meet the requirement. Is that correct?
Theoretically, yes. That's what the planning board could be questioning.
Yeah, and that's now you're putting in even more parking, or you're requiring more parking. You say, okay, you're required to have 10 spaces. And if you have 2 EV that can only be used by 2 EV, then you have 12 spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, that goes into your bailiwick, Dan.
Yeah, so let me just ask a similar question. If somebody has a requirement to have 2 handicap spaces, accessible parking spaces, and they decide, I have a target audience that could use more, I want 4 accessible only parking spaces, there's nothing that stops them from doing that, right? So
No.
so it's a similar, I sort of see it as similar. I'd rather delete that phrase and then let the planning board, again, I think this is something that comes to some combination of planning and town board. Let us try to work with it.
But Jim, wouldn't you be giving them an incentive if you allow them to include it?
Yes, I think it gives them an incentive to put in electrical vehicle charging, which we might want.
Yeah. Like if you say it's part of your 10 spaces.
Right. I mean, but if somebody only has it, if we think it's really a high traffic area or apt to be a problem, we might say, oh, if you're going to restrict, we could probably say that.
Well,
Yeah, and it seems to me that you could give some relief or something if people were like running into real problems with that somehow.
What were you going to say, Jen?
I mean, well, should in that section C, shall be moved to may? May be counted.
Yeah, that might be your solution.
That's
Yeah.
a simple fix.
Yes.
I like that.
So who
Perfect.
does the may then decision belong to?
Planning board.
Planning board.
Oh, okay. So if I'm the developer or whatever, and I look at that, I can't assume that they will be.
Correct. Yeah.
Correct.
Oh,
But we
Yeah,
talk about these things, you know, so I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah. I mean, I like shall. I think, with the trends and everything, is and as was said, it seems to incentivize or at least not disincentivize. If people have to consider it like we'll have to add spaces and do that, then that's going in the wrong direction in terms of the incentives and everything. I don't know.
I mean, that's why I didn't really want the restrictions put on it.
Sounds like we're a little divided here. I'll just make a note of that. We can think about it.
Yeah, so
Come back to it.
Well, right now, we're recommending no restrictions.
Right.
Right.
yeah, but if somebody says it's an EV charging only, then they have to build an extra space, which is sort of if you think there's a real target, a potential market to have people want to come and charge while they're at your place, and they'll never know if it's being, blocked by a car that's not charging. There's less, it becomes a disincentive. People won't come because, oh, I can park there and charge, because they won't know that they'll be able to charge. If you look on apps now, there's a lot of apps that say, oh, this charging thing is busy because it's actually being used to charge. But if somebody's just parking there and they're not using it, it looks like it's available for charging. And if somebody's just parking there and there's no restrictions on that, it's really quite disappointing. I mean, it's a very bad disincentive. I
think it depends if you're talking about incentives for developers versus electric car users. Let's put a pin in that. We're not going to be able to come up with the answer that the town board will ultimately decide. So,
But Jan, you're in favor of May or something different?
I'm in favor of it, as long as I'm in favor of deleting the piece after D and E, period.
And leaving shall or changing to may.
I think planning board can implement that, the may as a shall, pretty.
Okay, so may, in other words, gives
Yes.
you the okay. All right. Well, I
I
mean
would prefer May too.
that's okay with. I mean your proposal is okay with me, May, and cut out the as long as there's no restrictions.
okay, now it's swinging in a direction. So it sounds like more people in favor of changing to May.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hear any strong objections? No. Okay, then I'm gonna put that in there. Okay.
And we delete the part after D and E.
Yes.
And delete the part about no restrictions.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, I think. Yes, that was the only comment there. So any other questions or general concerns? Yeah, we got everything else because we're leaving it as town attorney. Okay, Jan?
Yeah, I think the other thing that we talked about here, which is important, is that sort of putting a note to ourselves or putting in one of the work items and goals and objectives is to work on a more comprehensive electrical vehicle charging amendment to the code.
Yep, that's in the I put that on the follow-up list.
Great, thank you. Can't see that.
Right, sorry. Okay. Think anything else on parking? Okay. So up next is district regulations. Now Andrea had some questions in here, but she is not, she sent a note a little bit ago saying she wasn't coming tonight. So
I think in terms of, why don't you scroll down?
Yeah. Yep.
So I think in terms of Andrea's, you know, I just raised the question of like, are these provisions still suitable for the town? Right now, this is what you have. These aren't provisions that I suggested. So we can just leave it as is. And if the town board wants to amend it dealing with animals, we can do that at some point. Because I think that's what Andrea was really referring to.
Got it. Does anybody have objections to leaving number 3 here as is? This is how it is in the current code.
Okay. Yeah, it occurred to me, some question came up about farming and stuff offline on a separate issue. And I feel like we should get somebody like from Cornell Cooperative or somebody to, go through our whole code for farming friendly stuff with a dispassionate eye, because a lot of times we'll get it from, the people that want to do it or whatever. And we should have some expertise applied in this stuff, but no current ideas right now.
Right. I think that's what Andrea was raising, because she said we have a number of families with chickens and other animals, and technically you're having not less than 2 acres of land available for the first animal and 1 acre for additional animals. So theoretically, if you had a 4-acre lot, you could have like 3 chickens. So,
yeah, that doesn't make any sense for chickens.
So that's why I was raising it.
Chickens go in a little, corner and then run around and whatever. Yeah,
that's right. So, I mean, I'm happy to provide some other suggestions at this point, or if you want to do like a more holistic thing that can go on the bucket of like next round or something that the town might want to consider doing.
Does that, I guess that kind of feels like a next round, like a follow-up thing, because it probably crops up in many different places.
It does. There's a number of different farm regulations in this code that seem a little outdated.
So what would I call that? Like farm and
husbandry?
Animal?
Yeah,
farm and what?
Husbandry.
Okay, got
But
it.
I do think it might depend a little bit on the definition of animals. I mean, if somebody has, so we do know somebody has a kangaroo at least, and we know people have llamas, and we know people. So there are some that I think maybe a bigger, chickens are a different kind of animal than, if somebody decides they want to get a muskox, I mean, so
absolutely. Yep.
So
and that's
well, usually isn't it divided into fowls? I mean, like there's sections about chickens or fowls in particular, rather than putting them in the animal category.
Right. So I guess I guess I'm coming to the agreement that everybody else said is we need to put maybe ask the experts in to give us some recommendation.
I think that's a great idea. Because otherwise we can keep running around about this, and at least they would know how much land is needed for an appropriate, raising of the animals.
Okay, that is officially on the follow-up list, and I'm just responding to that comment so Andrea can see it. Okay, great. So I think we can move on. The next comment.
Oh, let me just say, I moved everything into a table.
Yeah.
Because there was, you know, first of all, I think it's helpful to see what you allow or don't allow in the various, you know, in the various districts, but also there was just, when you went through them, it just seemed like there was a lot of like, well, maybe this year you added it into some language into one district, and another year you added language into another district, and there was a little bit of inconsistency. So what I did was like anything that was a permitted use automatically went into the table. If there were additional conditions, I kept those, and those are added into the text of the specific districts.
Good.
So that's why you see a lot of things crossed out. It's not that I'm saying we should remove those uses were moved into a table.
Good. And I see Judd.
And yes, and I say thank you, Valerie. Really, it's yeah, it's the way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Good. So that's what all these changes are here. And there weren't any other comments or questions.
No, but I didn't want to automatically start removing anything because I figured this one was going to be more of a substantive discussion.
So the table is not here yet.
It's number 5
Yeah,
in our batch. We'll get to it
Okay.
in a little bit. Okay, so this question, Valerie, do you want to address this specifically?
So, I mean, this particular is, oh, so this shows up, I think this is the accessory uses. If you go to the current use table, if you go to number 5, you have, scroll down.
What am I looking for?
Keep going to accessory uses.
Keep going.
Uses, okay.
Yeah, there's the storage of trailer boat. See, it's there. It turns out that it was like, it was permitted in every zoning district. So that's why I took it out and I just made it its own accessory use.
Got it. Okay. And then there was another one. Storage and then signs. Do those show?
Signs is an accessory use for in
Oh,
that same table.
So I can just reply to this and say these are highlighted in this.
Yeah. So where I kept some very specific things, so like swimming pools or other accessory recreation, and then it had specific parameters associated with these zoning districts only, that's when the text remained.
Okay, Jan, you have a further question?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that so we have a lot of lakeside rights of way that have a bunch of boats stored at them pretty much year round. And they're stored but used. They're in useful activity. It's not like they're stored away from, over for the winter with a cover on them. They're stored next to the lakes for use of the residents. I don't know that I don't think anybody's enforcing it, but I just wanted to bring it up as a, these are not as necessarily accessory to a use on the lot. It's a right of way that doesn't, it might have a beach on it. It might have a dock at the end of it. And a lot of them have it without today. I think they're basically not regulated, and I didn't know. I don't know what happens in those cases. I don't want to discourage it, but again, while we have, Valerie with her expertise here, is there something that we should do to make it explicitly allowed?
My only concern is you might find that your boat storage area is okay, but you're going to probably want to put parameters, right? Like all of it, because if another lake community has twice the amount or 3 times the amount of boats stored, when does it become like a potential nuisance? So that, I mean, we can regulate it, but it's going to be regulated then. And I don't know if you want to
regulate it at this point. I don't think I really do. I mean, I think it's up to the associations to kind of manage it if there are abandoned boats that are left there and starting to look rotten and stuff. I think it's, but I'm
That's property
just trying to figure
maintenance.
out if it was part of here at all. I'm not encouraging regulating it because I don't know what parameters I'd recommend.
Okay, so I think I can mark this as resolved then.
Mhm.
Okay. Wait. Maybe I did.
No, it's all right. You just got rid of the edited changes. It's fine.
Okay. All right.
So you can keep scrolling down.
Okay, got it. This is another thing. I think we already addressed this. This falls under the animals and animal husbandry and farming, I think. Is that
Well, and I think there's also, you also have a dogs chapter. I think this really deals with like animals as opposed to land use, right? Because, single family homes have special protections. You're not going to have a building inspector going in and trying to inspect like how many animals you have in your single family house. But the building inspector could deal with property maintenance if for some reason you walk into a house and it's overrun by a certain number of animals or there's unsanitary conditions, right? Those fall under building code violations as opposed to zoning code violations.
okay? We're good with that? Okay. Can I mark that as resolved, or that's gonna? Do you want me to mark that as resolved, Valerie, or should I leave it?
I just leave it and I can.
Okay, you'll do it later. Okay. Did you want to talk about this, Valerie?
Yeah, so I think in all reality, you already have a wetlands, you already have a wetlands, chapter, so that would automatically protect this. Again, I'm happy to even just remove this completely. I mean, this was something that was specific dealing with farms, but I know in the wetlands regulations, you already have stuff about manure. So, I mean, it might be duplicative at this point.
Judd?
I prefer to, oh, sorry. Judd, were you going to say something? Go ahead.
No, I mean, it is duplicative. Whether you want to keep it in or out, that's a kind of a judgment call.
Ooh, oh, go ahead, Janet.
Yeah, I'd prefer, I think, to keep it in because this is another place where we have run into a number of violations. And as long as they're in line with each other, I think it's a good reminder to people when they're looking at what can I do with my animals. They won't necessarily, they'll look at the zoning code first before they tend to
Before
look
they
at the
go to
wetland code.
wetlands code, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not only wetlands, right? This is like property lines as well. So, I mean, we know we have issues there where people would love to put their manure next to, away from them and near somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good.
so we should leave this in. Do we need to clarify what, Valerie? Oh, I can't hear you. Just come a little closer to your screen.
Better?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Mhm.
I will remember to mark it.
Okay.
So before we go on, so Judd also sent over.
Just on that, if
Yeah.
you wanted to say, instead of or wetlands area, do you want to say, or a regulated wetland?
What were you gonna say, Valerie?
Now, before we move on, I wanted the renting of rooms. This is something that Judd brought up
Yeah.
in his comments, in terms of short-term rentals. And again, this is something that would be another side project of the town, but this is something, it was just right below where we were.
Mm.
If you scroll back up again.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there it is. So that's another, I think, additional thing that the town might want to consider.
What should I call that on our follow-up list? Just renting of rooms.
Short-term rentals.
Short-term rentals, yeah, short-term rental regulation.
Got it. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Copy that. It's on the list. Charlene? Oh, okay. Oh, you're on mute.
I haven't read the current case law, but what is a family?
Oh, Judd provided.
Yeah,
this.
yeah, we went through the definition, and Valerie had prepared one, and I'm okay with it.
Okay, so we have it in the definitional
Yeah, it's
section.
in the definition section, yeah.
That's fine. That's my question.
Okay. Okay. I think.
So
Oh, there's.
campus commercial, can I ask a really just broad question? Like when I read that, I'm thinking like that's something from like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when people were actually doing such things. And does anybody, is that a thing anymore? Like we're trying to anticipate and it seems to me it's kind of not fully squaring with sort of current day thinking in a lot of ways.
Did you add this, Valerie, or is this part
No,
of the code
this
already?
exists already.
No, it
Yeah,
exists,
already.
yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to get rid of it?
Well, then you're rezoning those properties that are already zoned CC20, and they already seem to have development on them.
Do they have anything that is actually? I mean, I think this anticipated the Pepsis and the IBMs and the office complexes with their own 20-acre campus and whatever. And
And Dan, as a resident of Somers, I can tell you that both of those don't exist anymore, and we're going to be paying the price.
right now,
Yeah,
now they're trying
yeah.
to figure out what to do.
No,
with it.
I mean yeah. But that's I mean, I think that's a broader policy question I think the town board has to deal with.
Right.
Yeah, this is a current code provision. You
Yeah.
have, it's mapped, it's out there. And
I'm imagining that they could all be converted to whatever we call it, general business, and without missing a breath, you wouldn't even notice it.
Well, Katie, can you go to the current use table? I think that might be helpful in this discussion.
Sure. Where?
Scroll up to permitted uses.
I mean, the site of Lewisboro Commons was CC20.
That's what I was
Right,
going to say.
which had been approved, way back when, for what would have been envisioned as campus, business, commercial development at that time, and it never came to pass.
Right.
And
Yeah.
didn't Golden's Bridge Village Center come in with something that was sort of a residential and commercial and hotel and business that might fit? I thought it was
That's my
sort of a
point. My point is
CC20.
this is not this zone is not an office only zone.
Right, no,
Right.
true, right.
See all these Ps. All
Yes.
of this stuff is permitted. And
Yes, so that's my point. So that's why I felt like I didn't raise it as we should do a holistic change, right? If you had I'm just going to say I think it's in some of those other areas where you had an old IBM or an old Pepsi, right? And then that's the only thing it was zoned for. I would have definitely raised that as we should probably consider, what the long-term use is, but there is a lot of other uses that you can apply to this zone, which made me feel a little bit comfortable that even though some of the language is antiquated, it's not so antiquated
Right.
that you can't.
You're shoehorned into, right.
No, I see that, but it also, how does it differ from the business district? Sort of, what's the SU? That's next to it.
The SU is special utilities.
Special utilities, okay, but you know, RBGB, I mean, most of the Ps are in the same places for the most part.
Mm-hmm. They are.
It's almost, I'm just saying, I think I'm guessing it'd be pretty painless, but I could be wrong if there's some, you know,
It doesn't, it sounds like it could go on the list, but it's not high priority
yeah,
compared to the
yeah.
other stuff we've talked about.
All right, I'm raising it up as a housekeeping opportunity.
Yeah, I think you would have to, if you were to rezone it, right, and just remove that zone, the one thing you'd have to look at is some of the bulk regulations, right? Because
Right.
because I think there are some minimum requirements in terms of acreage to redevelop those properties. So that's just something that you would need to look at a little bit more
So it
holistically.
would most likely get less restrictive. Is that
That's
is that
correct.
right? And you know, a lot of those areas may be areas where we want some flexibility, maybe in some larger scheme of how things are going to be developed. All right.
I put that on the list from Dan, housekeeping CC 20 district. Okay, Charlene.
Yeah, I to rezone something without knowing exactly what everything, there is.
Mhm.
But one thing I agree with you, Dan, is that maybe we can put it in as an objective, a very discrete objective to look at that zone to
Mhm.
see what could be done. So, you get what you need on that, and you make it a specific goal and to look at it rather than just
Go on the list.
yeah.
Okay. Should we move on, or does anybody else have anything on that? Let's see, where were we? Oh, okay. Jan had a question here. What's this? Let's see. Valerie, do you want to address this? I'm not sure I know what it means. This Jan's comment here. Jan, do you want to explain?
Sure, it just says, buildings in use should not be discernible from off-site. And if somebody walks up to the property line or flies a drone over it, there could be off-site. I'm just saying change it to off-site roads or off-site facilities or something. Again, you walk up to the property line and you can see some of these things. So it's it's the word, it's at the end of 1B, the very last, right there. Buildings shall not be discernible from off-site, and I'm just saying maybe say from off-site roads or off-site facilities, because I don't know. That seemed very restrictive. But if we're gonna not really worry too much about the CC 20 right now, then I can certainly live with it.
Okay. I think we'll mark that one as resolved for now, given the broader issues there. Let me find it. Oh, okay. Judd, want to weigh in on this one? If this should be town board versus planning board? And you're on mute. Where is this under? This is under development density calculation.
Yeah, and I continue to, I think all of those reference to planning board should be town attorney.
Okay.
Yeah, I defer to Judd.
Yeah.
Let's see. I don't think there were that many more comments. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Bear with me, almost done. Okay, let's see, we're gonna mark that one. Jan, which phrase? Okay, do you want to answer that, Valerie or Judd?
I'm just gonna say that's language that's already there in your zoning, so I didn't touch it, but
And
I'll defer to Judd.
yeah, and one of my comments, related to this in terms of, um, placing ownership of the open space areas within, really within an HOA. In other words, not dividing it, but having a designated HOA, a single owner, because I think one, it makes it easier from an enforcement perspective in terms of if there are open space issues that need to be addressed, easier to pursue a single association as opposed to, going, and having to chase all property owners in terms of equal ownership. And also, I'm just from and I'm not going to weigh in on how those open space areas should be assessed, but from a tax perspective, if they are assessed and there are tax issues, better to have it in a single entity. So those are that's picked up in my
Yes.
Okay.
set of comments. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have his list, and I'm gonna go in after the meeting, and again, a lot of them are not substantive in terms of policy, but more of legalese.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, those are just grammar questions. This is one big comment on the floating. Okay, so now we're moving into floating.
I took care of her comments. If you scroll down to my response, I took care of all of them except for there's one, I think. So her comments for A2 and F are two that we probably need to talk about. So A2 was specifically just dealing with if you happen to have somebody who's maintaining the property, or like if there happens to be a super that lives on site, they don't have to be 55. That's all it is. It's not meant for if you have individual caretakers, right? That's a totally different situation.
Dan?
Yep, I was just gonna say I appreciate you clarifying that for me. Is that clear enough to everybody else?
I think so. Did anybody else find? Okay. And then what was the other one?
The other one was referred to existing cluster development code, which we can. That's not a problem. And the one thing though, I know there were some concerns with the cluster development, like, so your cluster development code or like provisions are like some of it's not exactly as the town law is. And I know Judd also had some comments on the cluster development, that I'll be working in. But so, I mean, I can refer to it, but it probably needs a little bit of tweaking as well, in terms of its text.
Yeah, my concern here was that, so in our current cluster codes, you can put in basically as many fit in the big space with the current zoning and put them into a cluster development. So if it's 4-acre
Yes.
zoning or 2-acre zoning, you get that number. This just sort of says you have to establish open space, but it doesn't give any sizing or quantitative thing of open space. And I'm just afraid it's going to be, if there's not a if you agree, okay, I'm clustering a bunch of things there, and what the remnant is a 10-foot wide circle around the outside of the place, somebody might argue that is appropriate under this cluster. So I think there needs to be a certain minimum size associated with the open space, whether that is because of the cluster development rule or imposed in this code.
Can you go down to section F, Katie, so we can look at what she's referring to?
Mhm. Lower.
Nope, up above, even up there, it's the F. It's the remaining lands preferably contiguous in a cluster development upon which development is not proposed. But it doesn't say it's delineated, it should be protected, but it doesn't have any size thing. So again, I can take a strip of land that there's no sense of proportionality here that I think, and I think it's the intent of this to say there should be a cluster development and there should be some substantial amount of, or non-trivial amount of open space. And I think it would be easier to implement that if it actually said that.
Sure. I mean, I can look at what you have in your cluster provisions, and I can either refer to a specific section, or maybe I will like say at minimum, like, you know, I'll take a look and do a little math, but let's just say minimum 25% of open space or something like that.
There ought to be
Okay.
some minimum, in my
Okay.
opinion, and I think I don't want to be overly punitive, but otherwise we shouldn't even bother saying open space.
Right.
Does that make sense to you, Jed? Yeah, okay. Okay, so that takes care of those two comments from Jan, right? And everything
Right, I
else.
want to
we
just
discussed.
scroll up, because this is one thing I just want to make sure everybody saw the proposed densities that I was proposing for this overlay.
Where is that?
Go scroll up a little more.
Oh, right.
Those right there.
Mhm.
So I'm proposing 4 dwelling units per acre, and that if they do provide affordable housing, that you could get a density bonus of like at least increased by more than 50%, so up to like 6 dwelling units per acre.
Everybody okay with that?
I think that's a town board
Yeah,
decision,
At the starting place.
but that's part of where the, you know, if you're gonna, that's pretty dense in my, I mean, more than we have in a lot of the town. And so if we're gonna do that, that's why it's important to have open space. That was sort of the other balance. That's what triggered it for me.
Got it. That's very helpful to hear this
Right.
conversation
Now
now.
this process is going to be like it's a floating zone. So somebody would have to petition the town board in order to land that zone. So it's not something that automatically gets landed everywhere. It's going to be of like, you know, certain developments, and they would petition the town board to actually land that zone on a particular piece of property. The unit count that I worked off of is similar to the unit count that you have for example, you have some unit counts for like nursing homes or senior living facilities, and so I kind of worked on that general, if it's, and those are also special permits in some of your residential districts. So I kind of used already existing densities that seem to have, you know, that are special permits. So I started there as the base.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Okay.
Great. I think we're almost to the end. Little admin things here. Yes. Okay. That's made it to the end of that. So any general, I'm just gonna add a note where Valerie's incorporating Judd. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Okay, so let's move on to the supplemental regulations. And do you want to just walk through? These are removed because are
Yeah,
they?
so what I started noticing here is that sometimes the some of these things had like, so the special permits also made it to that same table.
Mhm.
And so what I found was a little bit, because sometimes in these supplemental regulations, they were talking about like, here's these special permit uses, and they weren't necessarily identified in the use regulations. So everything is all
Oh.
referred to uses under the use regulation section, and the special permits are in the table. And these are additional supplemental regulations that are not just saying this use is permitted. It's more about what are the regulations associated with a particular use that they would have to demonstrate to the boards why they can get the special permit.
Okay.
So it's messy right now, but eventually it'll be cleaned up. But you know,
Is-
so it specifically highlights. And the other thing too, it was, and I'm suggesting this, that the zoning board of appeals was authorized to approve some special permits, but not all special permits. And the special permits they were identified to approve dealt with like private kennels, ranching, temporary stands for the sale of field and crops, and nothing that really stood out that is it's so unique that the ZBA should be looking at that special permit instead of the planning board, since the planning board looks at so many special permits. What I am suggesting to keep still with the ZBA is when any use that's established legally as a special permit for which a special permit was issued, but for which provisions have since been deleted or amended, right? That's a very unique situation that the ZBA might want to look at. And then also construction or placement of accessory building or lot proximate to or across the street from a principal building, right? Because that's also a very unique situation. And then I also added here agency operated boarding homes or group homes, which also that was already in your code, and I'm still keeping that in this particular section.
that all
But
makes
the others, I'm moving out and suggesting that the planning board reviews them, because they are going to be potentially part of a larger site plan application.
So I'll just say, I appreciate that because sometimes we do have things that end up at both boards. The one thing I noticed that sometimes in here you call it the Board of Appeals. I don't know. I think most people know that's the Zoning Board of Appeals, but I'm wondering if that's a mass change or something that needs to get.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're in your code right now, but what we can do, the same thing with like things when this says master plan, like I'll do, once we finalize this, I'll do like a search and replace and can refer to it as the Zoning Board of Appeals.
I don't know. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's how they're typically referred to, so that would be helpful if it's
Yeah.
not hard.
Right, because I think I'll also do the he, him, like I know we're gonna get rid of that to there, and then also we'll do Board of Appeals and Master
Chair.
Plan.
chairman going to
Right,
chair and secretary going to admin.
right. Okay. Oh, and then the other thing with this is more process than anything. So this
Mhm.
really dealt with trying to combine, because some of them, like, so some of this process, there, it was a little strange because it had a zoning board of appeals review process for special permits. Then the planning board review process for special permits specifically just referred to the site plan approval, right? So you had these two separate reviewing so what I just did was basically combine it together so that if you need a special permit, this is the review process, because there's going to be times that you might just need a special permit and not a site plan approval. So and what I did also was I tried to align, like I think the 62 days aligns with the site plan so that there is a little bit of alignment if somebody needs to do a site plan and special permit at the same time. And I have no idea if anybody, like, when people come in for applications, if they're really reviewing those different sections, but that's what so that's why it removed the Board of Appeals and dropped in approving board.
So Kirsten, on this, how many paper copies? I tried to say, I think you have one that you kind of work on and hand around, and then one you keep clean, but I'm not sure.
For the applications, I expect,
This would
Well-
be, this is a special permit?
so any planning board applications I take in, I want 4 paper copies currently and everything in PDF as well.
Do we need to be specific about that, or could we say like per direction of, or because that might change?
It does change because post-COVID, most of our board members are reviewing things electronically, except for one. So
Valerie, can that just be sort of general?
Yeah, I can make it.
Yeah, I would do that. Yeah.
So per the instructions of the administrator, board administrator?
sounds good.
Okay. Let's see if there's any more comments. I don't think so. The map. What is that? That
Why
is
why did public libraries go out?
where?
Wait.
Scroll down. I'll explain. Because they fall now under they fall, like, so this is for places of worship, including parish homes, schools, museums, and art galleries. Public libraries fall under like government facilities, right? Because they're owned by government. So I didn't think that this needed all the public library needed all these additional criteria. And they would also a lot of times be exempt from your own zoning, especially if they're funded by government.
So you've crossed it out in the heading, but it appears in the text right after it.
Okay, thank you. I will scrub that.
Okay, we don't need the Did we, so you updated the map?
Yeah, so I know I was just trying to explain. So there was a question on, so some of this refers to the town development plan map, and it is technically something in town law. So it's not referring to the comprehensive plan, it's actually referring to town development plan map. That being said, I don't know if your town has one. A lot of times it's in the codes and the communities don't know where they are, but it's different. I'll turn it over to the judge.
Had to litigate that a few times. Yeah.
Yes.
Because there is an official map that is to be posted in town hall, and yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I did not remove it.
Right.
Okay. Okay, there was a comment here from Charlene. Did you want to ask a question here? Oh, this is a case where it's taken out of the heading, but then it shows up in the text.
Yes, so I will remove that. Thank you.
Did that capture it, Charlene? Okay. Here. Okay, Valerie, you want to talk about this?
So I was just, again, this is for, and then this is, I'm just having this conversation, but I noticed that this is pretty restrictive for, especially for senior care facility. So that's like 4 to 6 beds per acre. So I don't know how much of a market there's ever going to be for somebody to come in with that. But I mean, I'm not saying you have to change it, but it's something that if for some reason you do want to allow for like these potential uses, you might want to consider changing that.
How does that Does that connect to the senior floating zone or
No,
not?
the senior floating
No,
zone is
yeah.
specifically for housing.
Right.
Okay, got it. Okay, so would you suggest that we recommend a change here and then let the town board deal with it, or?
Yeah, maybe that's something, and if they want to look into it some more, I mean, there's different standards that sometimes can get applied, but I just,
What do you think, Judd?
Again, I'd flag it for the town board to look at,
Yeah.
with Valerie's comment.
I think it might be more Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, it might be more helpful to propose a change and then let them discuss that. And because if you just flag it as needing discussion, they're going to say, okay, well, what's the
Mhm.
expertise here? Jan,
Well,
go.
Yeah, so, I thought if you, well, I forgot what I was gonna say, but if you said, if you wanted to recommend it, if it's between 4 and 6 beds per acre and you wanted to change it, you just cut that in half and say 1 patient bed for each 4,500 square feet of lot area. So that would be the doubling it, and you could say, you could leave it as a comment that said, if you wanted to make it more like others, you would change the square footage to 4,500.
Aren't there any guidelines for this as far as what would be appropriate?
Point.
communities, yeah, I mean, we could provide you some.
Yeah,
Yeah, just
I mean-
add a suggestion or some broad.
because 4,500
The other
is
thing
like
I
a
want to
whole
point
house.
out is that it also requires 10 times the normal
Yeah.
site size for like a residential district. So, and again, I understand it's a special permit, but if you have like your R4A, you would need 40 acres in order just to come in with an application. So again, and the reason why I'm highlighting this is because this is something that some communities do want to have opportunities for senior care facilities or some other sort of medical, treatment. So I'm just putting that out there for, consideration.
Is this an aerial definition that could be that the ZBA could waive?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you could potentially, I mean, you could even have it as, if it's a special permit process, you could even make this a special permit process for like the town board, right? We could even highlight the approving board would be the town board on this, you have a lot of different options. But this is something that I think policy wise, if the town wants to, potentially incentivize and not necessarily, I'm not saying you would have like 100 different facilities within the town, but I think the current regulations really do provide obstacles for somebody that's interested in potentially developing this here.
So would this cover, so we have 4 winds, which I'm not quite, that's sort of a, I don't
Yes,
know.
4 Winds would potentially fall under this because I think they are considered, I think they're a rehab facility.
Hospital.
A
Yeah.
hospital, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so would that allow them to, if we change this, would that allow them to potentially add more patient facilities than are they restricted today? Because that might just be a discussion that, the town board would either say, yeah, we really like that idea, or no, we don't. But that's the only thing I can think of right now that could potentially exist under this code.
Well, I don't know. I would have to look at the site plan and when it was approved and what were the criteria on it. But it is potential that if for some reason they meet the minimum requirements now and that you do change it, that they could potentially come in for request for an expansion.
Okay.
It was just suggested that this could go to the town board. It almost feels like it should, because it would be such a one-off, and almost like a policy thing in a sense, but just a thought.
Go ahead, Charlene.
You're
You're
muted.
on.
Take just issues to the town board, because I think that would sort of break precedent, no?
Certain,
We have some
I have to
comments.
take a look. There are a couple different uses that go to the town board in this code.
Yeah, I think if we want to do like cluster developments that are more dense than our existing code, it goes to the town board. So maybe it could be
Okay.
something like that, that if it is something that you know, wants to be more dense than this, it can be approved by the town board, but then leave the rest of the permit sort of management, because I think both having Jan and Judd as advisors and, you know, stormwater management and everything else that we go through is helpful in these reviews
For
that
sure.
aren't always assets right there for the town board.
Good point.
I agree.
Good point. Okay.
Okay. I think I captured that in the comment. Okay. Moving on. Let me know if you see anything, but I think
No,
oh. So this section,
Recall last time we had a conversation, the AFFH units are remaining. That's your newest affordable housing regulations. The affordable housing, like the I forget
Middle,
the
yeah,
term.
middle income.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That I kept the language in there because you do have some developments under those particular regulations, but since you're not planning to utilize those regulations in the future, that's kind of like where things end. So anything that's existing can continue to exist. If they need to amend, everything would still go under those current regulations. I'm not recommending that you take them out, but moving forward, your affordable housing would fall under this program.
Is there a way to capture that we won't be using the middle income?
It's in there.
It's in-
When you get to the middle income, it says
Okay.
it basically refers to past developments.
Okay.
and you can see comprehensive plan has a typo in its spelling there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so we can use them. These things don't have to be AFFH, but AFFH would probably be there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
so I think then I can stroll to Jan's comment here. Did you want to talk about this, Valerie?
So, I mean, this again, this is your accessory residence dwellings, and this is the one where you're adding an additional to like you're having two separate buildings on a lot. So if you want me to add a little bit more in here, I can, but that's what you have currently in your zoning.
Does that answer your question, Jan?
Well, I think if we add the comment that says the Westchester County Department of Health or the Department of Health has to approve splitting the lots in the future.
We can do that.
Is this C here something that existed, or we're adding this now? And what is this, like best practice in some respect? Because it seems counterintuitive to me.
It's currently in there.
Okay, that it has to be split offable like this.
Can someone explain to me what this means? I just don't get what it means.
Okay, so quite often, if you have one building and then you build another building, you may use one septic system to serve both buildings, and you may use one well actually to serve both buildings. If you then split them into separate lots, the Department of Health tends not to like to have two different buildings, two different lots that might be owned by two different owners using a common well and or common septic system. So it's just that if they want to split it, I don't know that doing a lot line change typically requires Department of Health for existing facilities, typically requires Department of Health approval, and maybe Jed knows that, but I just was thinking maybe we should add it so that people don't go into this expecting I'm going to be able to build a second thing on this other property and then I can sell it off and make a lot of money, and because they might not be successful.
Right.
Right.
The only thing is, I don't know if the Westchester County Department of Health would say that they would approve it, but you might want to say that, you know, if future subdivision does take place, that they would have to have their own septic systems and and individual wells.
Well, or,
That might
you
be
know,
the,
this reminds me of this where in some places we're moving to these advanced treatment package systems that can handle more than one property, and then you need a maintenance contract and an easement for it, you know, which that could be another path forward.
Jed, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, part of me feels that the subdivision process would kind of take care of that because you're going to need county
Right.
Department of Health approval at that time anyways.
Hmm.
But
Okay,
it may,
that's good enough.
but it may make sense to kind of flag it just to, can we just pin that? I'll take a look at that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Jan's question here. So this is saying street access may be shared.
Right.
And what are you saying? So I guess that's a kind of a policy decision.
But this will also go before your board, Jan. I'm pretty sure it's going to require a site plan.
Okay, so the planning board could weigh in at that point.
Does
Okay.
the accessory residence dwelling come before us, or is that a permissible? I get so confused.
I can
thought
take a
this,
look. I can take a look, and if not, I can make it come before your board for site plan.
I don't remember.
Do you want me to go to, where would that be?
It would be in the table.
In the table? Except at the accessory use at the end? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's just considered an accessory use, but we can put in there that under those special requirements that it requires site plan approval or something like that.
Yeah, that seems like it would make it an obstacle to people doing this. And I think there's
Okay.
a general desire to have people be able to put in accessory residence dwellings. But I think, how about where possible, street access should be shared with that of the principal?
Sure.
So it allows the option out of it, but I know that there's been a real push to try to limit the number of curb cuts we get, especially on busier roads.
Oh, I understand where, okay. Yeah, because if it's like on 35, for example, like the more driveways, the more stopping.
Yeah.
I understand that. Okay.
That's fine. We can do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is
this
the
is,
accessory residence building not in the table that you've constructed for us, Mallory?
It's under accessory buildings. And then
Under
you also
accessory
have
building.
there's accessory apartments and then accessory buildings.
So accessory building, we know that applies to accessory residence building.
Yes, because I'll confirm, like, I'll just make sure that the title is the same, but
Yeah.
I'm almost positive it's called accessory buildings.
Okay, just so there's no
Confusion.
yeah, it seems it's because I couldn't quite make it out.
Agreed, it's confusing. And this is confusing. The accessory use of renting of rooms shall be prohibited. Yeah, I'm confused because isn't that the whole
Yeah,
I think we can remove it.
I take it out.
Yeah, I think so too.
all of G?
Because it all appears elsewhere.
Well, I think, and it's also probably
So-
remnant. I mean, that's a good point, Jan, because it doesn't seem to really reflect what's going on today in terms of work and other types of accessory uses that typically happen in a home now.
This is just the old code that hasn't been updated in forever.
Well, plus we've got a B&B regulation that
Yeah.
allows people
Yeah.
to rent. I mean, it just, to me, anyway,
And-
thank you. If it's
and-
gone,
And the renting of rooms provision and the whole question of how you want to deal with short-term rentals. So,
mhm.
yeah, I think, yeah,
if we take it out and we say we really have to get to short-term rentals at some point, I think that would be great. Thank you.
Anyway, after I read from prohibition of other permitted uses, my brain kind of goes like
That's true.
prohibited or they're permitted or
Yeah. Oh yeah, what is so is your question here, Jan, like what is what's the definition of a transformer station?
hmm.
We can.
Yes, isn't this where I think Judd recommended that our whole set of code for
Yes.
Mm.
whatever transformer station is, I mean, so there are these things that sit on the ground that are in big boxes, but there are also things that are up in the air that are I don't know enough, but
I think
Judd had provided some
well,
samples.
that was on the wireless provisions.
But I
And-
think,
Go ahead, Valerie.
no, I'm sorry, Judd, go ahead.
Yeah, the transformer station provision is still, I think, useful, but it probably could be looked at.
Who would look at that?
I mean, yeah, look, we can look, I can look at it, but as with the wireless provision, I mean, that is a wholesale change to the code. And we just need some direction from the town board that they want to move in that direction.
I think probably
I'm not, as the transformer station provision is an example, but I will tell you, like the wireless provision, that gives me concern because, federal law has changed. If, and so far we've had a very, cooperative relationship with our wireless providers, with the facilities that are in town, but that needs to be updated because should that change, or if a new tower or new facilities presented, the code is just outdated. It just doesn't, it's not up, it doesn't align with the federal law, so it really needs to be looked at. Kind of
yeah,
root branch.
I'll just
Yeah.
say, oh,
Wait,
sorry,
so
I'll just
Valerie,
say
I just
that
flag to look there and then flag to look on this one too.
I think transformer stations in the grand scheme of things, we can leave that one go, but I think because it's not that important. The communications thing is really important, as Judd just said. So
And you have, you have the advent of small cell facilities. We don't make any, there's no provision in the code for that. So I mean, I provided a sample. I provided I provided the Village of Pleasantville code. I mean, our office has drafted, a few of these, and kind of like the Pleasantville one, I think feel is probably the maybe the best example, just in terms of the fact that it's kind of streamlined, it's up to date, etc. But I think this whole provision needs to be removed and replaced.
Okay, that's a follow-up thing, a separate. So
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Well, I'm gonna just stay there for a second. I think if we have code that has been written, it exists and it complies with the requirements, I don't know why we can't just, essentially grab it. Somebody else has done good work. Judd has looked at it and says it's much better than our code here. And I would strongly recommend, because this is one where we really are outdated.
You,
I will follow up with the town supervisor, because I think some of this is also we're getting close to like the end of like our budget. And I
Right.
know and Judd has certain agreements with the town. Like, so this is
Right.
where I think this follow-up conversation is going to need to take place, and go back to the town board and say, here are the items that we think that definitely still need to be looked at. And here are the ones of the highest priority, and to see what they want to do before this, this initial process gets to the end.
Right.
right, that's what I mean by putting it on the follow-up list, that it's essentially out of scope for budget here, but that it could be tacked on as if there's additional budget available.
Okay, I understand that a little bit, but if we could copy paste and just change whatever town that was to Lewisboro, and that would be adequate. It doesn't seem like I don't know.
Look, let Valerie and I talk to Tony, and we can work through some of this, I think.
Right, because this is one of the ones that I think is really important. Okay, well, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Agree.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna skip the specific comments on this part, since this might just be all going away. And I'm still in that section, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Agency operated boarding homes. Oh, okay. Valerie, what do you think of that?
This agency operated boarding homes is going to be the zoning board of appeals. They're the ones that are approving that one.
Okay. Is that okay with you,
Thank
Jan?
you. Yep.
You want to speak to that, Jan? Or Valerie? Go ahead, Valerie.
So I do not know if you have any that meet all the conditions. But this is specifically allowed in your residential districts currently. And so I was just making it clear that it's not just professional offices, but the reason why this is getting it's supplemental regulations is because it's professional offices in residential districts.
Yeah, I'm okay. Mark me resolved.
Oh, that's a good question. Can you answer that, Valerie?
I think this is really meant for principal uses, because you already have accessory uses that would allow for home-based businesses, and that's where a lot of that would fall in. But once you start adding a number of different employees and stuff like that, that would fall outside of your home-based businesses, and I think would start falling into this professional office category.
Thank you. Mark it resolved.
Good questions. Same thing.
Yeah, and same thing.
this is also, is this duplicative of somewhere else, or is
Yeah,
this?
I gotta
new
look at the
here?
definition because I thought we did 14 days. So I'm gonna double check on that. I have to do that.
Okay, good. Yeah, we want those to match up. Think that's it, but let me just scroll all the way to the end. Okay, those are all the comments there. Yeah. Okay, so any on supplemental regulations, any lingering questions or general comments? Okay. So the next thing is this current uses table, which we all agree is fantastic and really improves the user experience when it comes to the code. Okay, so Jan's question here, is there a way to indicate which are issued by who?
And I can do that if you prefer to do that. That's not a problem.
It would be like an extra thing added in.
Yeah, I'll just add an extra, right? That's not a problem.
Okay, great. There we have covered that. It's always an attachment.
Yeah.
Does this include, does recreational and fitness include golf courses?
Right, so that's what I want to talk to you about because so right now what I saw in your code, a couple things. One, the recreational and fitness and outdoor clubs and facilities, I highlighted, I put it in there, but right now you don't allow it anywhere, but yet you have the walkabout golf clubs. So I didn't know if we wanted to, if that, I didn't know if for some reason that's just a pre-existing non-conforming use and that's exactly how the town wants to see it, then, you know, but if for some reason you wanted to add that or allow for those kind of uses, then I think we should talk about which zoning districts. And it, I mean, I know it's getting late, so we don't have to, you know, it's something that people could weigh in on. The other thing too is you don't have anything that allows for like veterinarian offices in your zoning. So I didn't know, again, you have definitely have lots of language about kennels, private kennels, you know, but nothing about veterinarian offices. So I didn't know if you wanted to explicitly allow for that. And another thing was funeral homes and cemeteries. You don't have anything in your town code for that, you know.
And Jan pointed out we don't have transformer stations in here, or
right, what I assume would go in under utilities, right, public utilities, but
and Jan brought up cannabis as well.
right, that's another whole thing because that would be right now. I don't think the town opted out, but cannabis, like manufacturing cannabis, like there's a lot of other cannabis industries that could potentially come in, and they could potentially fall under one of the other categories. But that's something else.
But then like for all these things that are highlighted that aren't in the code, then it would be that the town board would decide which districts they're allowed in, essentially.
Right. I mean, we could just even highlight to them to say, by the way, like this is, you know, I noticed that these right now you don't allow these uses, and these are kind of common uses that you would see in other communities.
And they do exist. I mean, we do have cemeteries, we do have a vet, we do have you know, the golf club, I think is the golf course is probably pre-existing
non-conforming. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I think probably the vet might be as well, but
Two vets.
but we, oh, two.
Yeah.
But we, oh, that's right. But so, but it still might be now, I guess this is a question for Dan. If you'd like us to recommend where we think it ought to go, as opposed to just sort of saying, okay, take a look at it. But I think, Valerie, I think part of the value of having this table is that it shows us what we do and don't have.
Yes.
And I guess I'm going to recommend that one of the things that gets put on the table for future discussion is cannabis somewhere, because at some point somebody's going to want to grow it, or, you know, some of the permitted uses
Right,
no, that,
Right.
that can't be opted out of, might
correct.
happen, and we're gonna have to deal with it.
Right. And the other thing too is with this table, it might be worth having an exercise with the town board just to go through the different zoning districts to make sure there's no other uses that they want to allow in a particular zoning district that they're not allowing right now because for some strange reason it just didn't make it onto that list when the lists were being developed for the various zoning districts.
Since you put cemeteries down there, I recall that we had somebody come to us with the proposal for a columbarium. Which I had to learn that word, but that's, I guess, where you're storing ashes in a nice place or something like that. I don't know if that's a separate thing.
And can we assign this? We have some time between now and January 3rd deadline when we have to get all drafts to the town board. So why don't we assign this as like a little extra homework for them to take a closer look at and weigh in on more specifically?
Yeah, the one other thing that I just want to scroll down, there's one other thing that I just want to highlight about this table. I did have like the solar and battery energy storage in there as uses, but that's like a whole nother discussion. I know, I think I sent Katie some like model, like legislation, but I think she decided that we already gave you a lot to review. So I just kind of highlighted that as well, but I can remove that for the town board in terms of just initial discussion of just a lot of regular uses that.
Well, if the town board wanted to adopt code there, Valerie, my understanding from you is that would go on the list of like out of
that should go on the list too. They should,
Yeah.
It needs to be on the list for sure. And we can't. I don't think we can not do this.
Yeah, I'd leave them there, but I think we need to
The flag.
flag it. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you said this is work for them, who is them? Is them us or is them the town board? Who's you're flagging this as homework between now and January 3rd for who to do what?
For the town board, but I guess for everybody. Well, I don't know. What do you think, Valerie?
You're talking about to review this table and see what's missing that pops to mind, right? So I think it can't hurt to point this particular document out, especially to the town board members who may not have seen this or something. And it's an easy, like a good visual, obviously.
Okay, I'll handle that.
Okay.
And so again, Valerie, I know this must have driven you crazy to try to produce it, but I really appreciate it. I think this is a big step.
Thank you.
Great job. Okay, so I think we can put a pin in that one. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so the last thing on the list to discuss is septic and sewage and sewers.
And you leave this to last.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. So Valerie specifically flagged this for everybody that she wasn't, gonna go through and make all these changes to this because she doesn't have direction from the town on how far we want to go with updating and how it would actually be enforced. Because the issue right now is that we have this code, it's not 100% clear, and it's definitely not enforced consistently. So I didn't get any. I did speak with Tony about it a little bit. I don't think he had a chance to connect with the rest of the town board and get specific direction on how they all felt about it. So we can take the conversation a couple different ways tonight. We can kind of talk about, in general, what we as a group think and what we would recommend. I guess that's really the only option, huh? Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna do that. And I know it's late, so we don't have to really nail everything out, but just a general discussion.
I think I can summarize pretty quickly the couple different options that a community has, right? So you have right now, and forget about what it's worded, because I know Jan has pointed out the inconsistency in the definition versus the actual term. But communities can basically require people to inspect their septic systems and then provide, details on whether they passed inspection or not. The issue then becomes, if you fail inspection, then the assumption is that you're going to put the money in to upgrade your septic systems, right? But that's something that the town would have to endorse, saying you're going to have this inspection process every so many years. You have to provide documentation that it passed inspection. And if it didn't pass inspection, it needs to be, rectified. The other thing is also a pumping out, right? So you're requiring not only just inspections, but you're also requiring that people actually pump out their septic systems every so many years, and then also provide documentation that this is taking place. I think we heard a lot from the public about concerns about water quality. I think this would go a long way of helping to improve that, because I don't think everybody is, undertaking the types of inspections and upgrades that are necessary. That being said, it's something that the town would need to definitely commit to and develop a program and to actually enforce, because if not, it doesn't really do anything.
Okay, that's helpful. But then also there is the issue of being in the EOH, that there's there's a law that needs to be complied with there.
Yes, and I will say I've reached out to Westchester County multiple times and left messages and sent emails, because I wanted to have a conversation with them about, how much latitude does the town have, how they could help, and I never received a phone call back.
My understanding is that the way the program was supposed to work, and probably, I'm sure Janet remembers much more clearly than I do. It's always the case, but then that we set up this system where the septic haulers are essentially the inspection agents, and they're required to fill out the forms. The forms go into the county, who recovers that data. Our obligation, and this is something we probably have to come back to again, is to be monitoring that data to see who's not been pumping, and maybe mail to them if they don't meet that. But if they've run out of compliance, I thought the enforcement was with the county Department of Health. As what you're shaking your head, Janet, is that
So
go ahead.
the enforcement to pump out, is with the town.
With the
And what
town.
we have
Okay.
is that mechanism of fines.
Yeah.
If it fails, it's supposed to be reported to the Department of Health. But we have an active system now, and again, the Department of Health has been disappointing, where there's a holding tank that essentially is acting as a bathtub, where the effluent comes in and goes out. It hasn't been pumped since 2021, as far as I can tell, and there are a bunch of these that are not being pumped. So we have some problems. So I understand the big problem with, and it really is, it's not just our town. There's 18 towns in Westchester and Putnam that all have this requirement, and that was imposed by the MS4. And it's sort of, nobody has enforced it. So
But I don't understand, if this is effluent coming out of this tank, and it's not meeting Department of Health, they have enforcement capabilities, don't they?
they do, but that's only if they take action. So right now but anyway, that's a whole different story. So
Right.
what I'm trying to say is, if we just look at this code, I would like to do, because the enforcement is a bigger deal. I would like to make sure that two things happen in it. And one is that there's a phrase that snuck in that said "in the watershed," that should be struck out if you go down, Katie, for it. I mean, we could, we.
Yeah, no, this code, this applies townwide. Right.
Yeah, it should apply townwide, but it says in the watershed, which would say it only applies to 2/3 of the town, and I think that
was not the intent.
not the intent. So within the watershed. So first, I think
Well,
located in the town of Lewisboro and eliminate and within the watershed. So that's one. And then the second thing I think we really need to say, I would really like to say is that holding tanks should, because we say here, septic tanks should be pumped out at least once every 5 years. And we should, I believe, say holding tanks should be pumped out at least once every 1 year. I mean, it should be more often than that, but I'd like to see that just to have a way so that we can start billing this. If we come across a problem, we can start billing that number. And I love the fact, Valerie, that you wanted to boost the number way up. We'll start with, if we could ever collect $200 every 2 weeks, I think that's a pretty good enforcement mechanism for to try to get somebody to fix their holding tank, or at least pump it out. I do like, and you had that one other thing in there that said something about if something fails inspection and you let ... that would be a wonderful change, but I don't know if, seek immediately.
I better stop and have like a larger discussion. Yes. I did send out some other laws that are, that have been implemented in other communities, and a couple of them actually came from New York State DEC as like exemplary laws. So, again, some communities have instituted like additional requirements for inspections when properties change hands or other things. So these are all like, there's a lot of different tools for the town. It's just deciding, what you want to do.
So I think the question is, I know Valerie, you had kind of suggested that you needed some direction. I'll let Charlene go first.
Yeah, I just have like, in the laws that you had, if one, and I think we can do it in the law that we have now, if in fact someone applies for a permit, since the regulation requires a pump out every 5 years, could we not ask for that prior to giving out a building permit? The building.
I'm going to jump in on that, because that is actually something that Kevin, I was going to say our most recently appointed building inspector has volunteered to do. It would be something that would change the permit process. I don't think it has to be part of our code. I mean, not the permit process, but the building permit application process. He would put on there, hey, please, submit this. And what that just needs is agreement from the town board. I think when you're going to make something that is going to be as visible to the entire town as that might be, I think it would be helpful to get their agreement. Oh yeah, this is a good idea, before people start going to them and saying, what do you mean I have to, I'm just changing my furnace. I'm putting on a new deck. What do you mean I have to show you that I pumped my septic? But I think that would be dynamic, wonderful first start that doesn't change our code one iota.
Well, all he's doing is enforcing the code, right? Because if somebody can show that they've pumped it out within the last couple of years, then that's fine. But he's asking for that, right? So that's a way of enforcing this.
But we're not talking about making every applicant produce that, for anything, produce it, are we? I mean, don't we in theory, we're supposed to have that information. Can't we just be checking against that data to see if they have?
Well, we don't, the town doesn't have that data. Me sitting in this house with my, with my, with my,
Right.
tech support that does this has gathered all the data from the county
Mhm.
through 2022. And
Mhm.
I happen to have it and I would offer it, but it's not official county. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pulled in from the county. It's massaged to make sure that the things that say they are on Main Street in Croton Falls are taken off. And, I mean, it's as good as it can be, but
Yeah.
if somebody doesn't show up on that list, they would then have to present it.
So that just takes us, the county needs to get that data together and make it accessible to municipalities to use. That's
So,
that
so
thing.
let's pause that for a second because that's all enforcement. But the code itself, I guess my question to Valerie is, can we, again, I know you wanted to do sort of like a all or nothing changes or more structured around other towns. Is there a way to just like,
why don't I provide options for the
yeah,
town, right? Why don't I provide options for the town board that are done in other communities? And the town board can go through and say, yes, no, yes, you know what I mean? And then we can revise this to reflect that.
because I think, and this is the sense I got from speaking with Tony too, there's been enough public feedback through this process and then separately just coming to the town board in general that there's the will to change this, but I guess there's not really like a sense of how that would work and then how does that jive with enforcement. So I think they just kind of need some direction on what they could possibly do and what that would mean for
I can do
enforcement.
that. I can provide that to you.
Yeah.
To send to
And
them.
I mean you kind of have already, but maybe in a way that they can put their hands on a little bit more.
Yeah, I can put together like a quick memo on that. That's not a problem.
Cool. Okay. Does that sound like a good solution to everybody?
Mhm.
And I think Jan's comments, and then there are a few from other people too, in this document kind of give you a sense of like what's top priority for this group.
Yeah.
So that you can use that as a reference too.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so what I don't want to get into something that is so, oh, there's so many choices, we can't make any decisions. I'd like to see like a minimum thing that would be just the updates of this for the kind of the points that we've been talking about, that sort of define inspection as it really is a pump out, that we add holding tanks a minimum of 1 year, and we get rid of the watershed. And that's one option. So that's like minimal changes meets
Yes.
minimum that you,
I can give them different levels
right.
and that might be helpful to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that would be like, if you do nothing else, do this. And then, but we think you should do other things, and which I would certainly support. But I'm
So
a little bit afraid that if somebody says, oh, it's too complex, let's leave it as it is. The leave it as it is should be with those couple of changes.
I
Okay.
agree with you, Jan, but also there has to be an enforcement mechanism because right now it's obviously not working. So we can change it and make it, and not change it completely, but change the things that we need to change. But there has to be a way of enforcing. And, actually Kevin's idea of the permit sounds to me the best and the easiest and without any legislation being required.
Well, it also shows the building department's willingness to enforce. They just need like
Absolutely.
some tools to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he did say that they get about 1,000 different parcels in over. So that's a quarter or a fifth of the parcels in town. So I think that would also be, it's a fairly substantial action if he actually took that. So he just needs the town board to say that. And I see John has his
Yeah,
hand
go
up. I
ahead,
just
John.
want to make one quick point. The inspection in this case is really not what you might think of as the detailed, dig up the distribution box, go determine exactly where the fields are. Inspection, as defined by the Department of Health as part of a pump out, is unfortunately just, are the baffles there? Is the tank cracked? Is there a wet spot where the fields are? And that's, so even the Department of Health admits that their current inspection is not adequate, but that's all they require. So they recognize that it really isn't a question of how functional the septic is. It's a question of how apparent the failure is.
Okay, John?
Yeah, the only comment I have is this is great when we have a building inspector like our current one. But the previous two, I don't know that it would work.
Well, I mean, I think everyone has to, I think that's the mind frame, right? Like the town board can tell a building inspector they have to do it, right? This is something that the town, it's a policy decision. It's saying you should enforce it, right? So I don't think you should look at developing a local law and approving a local law based on maybe you'll get a building inspector that doesn't enforce anything,
Yeah,
right?
no, I
Then
agree.
that becomes something that the town board should take up with, that's their job, right? So,
I'm just looking at it historically with trees, so
Right.
No, I understand the comment. It's just, enforcement is a huge issue in this town.
Okay. Any other comments about this sewage disposal chapter or section chapter?
So Valerie, I want to just say, I really commend your willingness to go to the fight on this one. It is something that's, I'm sure you heard loud and clear from people. Individuals have certainly talked to me about it. I know they've talked to Tony about it. I just think I don't know how to fix it. But I really commend you bringing this forward. I think it'll really help if you bring it up to the town board.
Okay, thanks everybody. Okay, I'm just gonna share my screen in a different way. So we finished, that was all the code. I just want to show everybody the law, the list here. So this is Valerie and Judd are going to speak with Tony about, I guess Tony and the town board, about how this fits in. It's out of scope, out of budget for the current project, but we're already doing all this work. We already have Valerie and her team. We already have Judd and Jan on the scene here. So did I miss anything on this list?
Cannabis.
Oh yeah, cannabis.
Anything else? What did you say, Valerie?
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Okay. Anything else? That capture it all?
What's the model battery energy and solar is in two places, one under, okay.
That was my reminder to just share that with everybody, but I think that'll fall under this exercise. So I'll just hold off on sending that because it's part of this discussion that needs to happen with the board. Okay. Any questions about that? Or so next steps, this concludes the scheduled meetings that we have for the zoning subcommittee. And I really don't think anything came up tonight in batch 3 that requires a lot of further discussion. And Valerie, we all still have access to the Google Drive folder. So
Right.
Valerie and Judd will be making changes there and folks can look in on that. And if we need to bring in somebody or answer a specific question, we can use the tag function to draw somebody's attention to it. So I think we're done in terms of these meetings, and that Valerie can finalize, and then we're going to pass final drafts, still in draft form, to the town board for for their review. And we're all going to talk about the draft comprehensive plan on Monday in the steering committee meeting, and then that'll get updated and sent to the town board. And then Valerie is going to be attending the town board meeting on January 8th to take comments from town board members or questions. And then we have the public workshop scheduled for January 29th. And then ideally public hearings will happen in February, and then adoption will happen after that. So I think we have everything tonight for Valerie to finalize and then get stuff to the town board and keep the schedule rolling. Any questions or concerns about the timeline or next steps? Okay, that's what I
No,
like.
that we have a town board meeting on Monday. So
Right, that was rescheduled from last week.
That list over to the town board for discussion of the, especially for the additional work, just to make sure that the town board doesn't want any of those components as part of this effort right now. Right.
Okay, do you need me to do it?
I
Valerie?
can, well, Judd, maybe an email, you, me, and Judd can
Yeah,
maybe coordinate.
There
Yeah.
was one, I'll bring that back up to the top of the, I'll reflag it for Tony and see if there's a way we can work that into the discussion before Monday. Okay, good. Good, then we're gonna send out the save the date for the January 29th public workshop tomorrow. I know Andrea isn't here, but she did review the documents, and I think we addressed all of her comments tonight, and I made notes for her so she could see. So I think we're good for the schedule. I think we can move forward.
All right.
Okay.
Could you just clarify, is septic additional work with budget, or is septic under the current?
No, I
budget?
was gonna try to work that under the current.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes, no, that was definitely, that was definitely gonna get worked in under the current.
Cool. Okay, any other questions? Okay, well then, any other questions, Charlene? Okay, then I think I can adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much to everyone who's watching on YouTube and people who are interested. Really appreciate your participation. Can I get a second for adjourning the meeting?
second.
Jan? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, whoa. I need to say this loud and clear. Thank you so much to all of you for all of your work. I hope that has been clear. You've been so great about looking at the drafts and making comments, and they're such a good product because of all the involvement from everybody. And Valerie, thank you so much for all the work from you and your team. Really, really, really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it, but it really, the zoning committee has been great, and it's been very helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, really great job, everybody. Thank you so much. And sorry I didn't say that loud and clear earlier. You really, all the thank yous, all the pats on the back. Way to go.
Back at you.
Thanks. All right. Well, have a great night, everybody. Happy